Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Lynda Becker. I'm in the St. Louis metro area and have a daughter at University of Chicago. I'll be working with the YCBK team on communications.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. Friends, welcome to episode 252, and I am joined by the newest member of our team, Lynda Becker. Hi, Lynda.
Hey, Mark.
I know you just got back from a high school reunion. I won't say which one it is. If you want to, you can, but that's we know how that age can be a sensitive issue. But any advice for parents who go back to their high school reunions?
Start dieting and working out early so you can hope to match your senior pictures all those years later.
I thought that meant that there's going to be some really good eats there.
There were plenty of good eats, plenty of libations. It was a wonderful time.
Good stuff. Awesome. So Lynda just gets back from a good solid week in Michigan, wasn't it? You did a little vacay there as well.
Yeah. Summer in Michigan's always good. Awesome.
Great. Well, today we really have one big announcement. I want to spend all of our time on that, and I'm sure everybody can probably guess what it is. Pretty blockbuster news, and that is, of course, Biden's announcement that went through about canceling $10,000 in student debt. And so I'd spent 10 minutes on this maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago in our announcement period because I was so confident it was going to happen. I thought it was going to happen back then. So I did a whole session on it. But now that it's actually happened, I want to break down what exactly is this announcement. Let's get into the weeds on it and then talk a little bit about sort of the back and forth conversation that's happening out there. So under the plan, borrowers can qualify for up to $10,000 in student loan forgiveness. And this was the really new news that nobody saw, at least nobody I read saw coming, that there'll be an additional $10,000 in loan forgiveness if somebody is a Pell Grant recipient. There are caps on it. The caps are $125,000 of income for a single and $250,000 for a married couple for taxes filing jointly. A couple more parts of the announcement. There's been a moratorium on students paying loans, a loan pause that's been in effect for some time, and I'll mention that in a second. But that will be over starting December 31st. So if you do have a student loan, and if that $10,000 does not abrogate all your debt, then starting January 1st, you will be back to making payments. And then there's one more super big component of the announcement, which is this new cap on maximum monthly payments for undergraduate borrowers. So those are the three big changes. And I'm going to just kind of go through some of the details here. A lot of the information I'm drawing is coming from Danielle Douglas Gabrielle, who writes for the Washington Post. And so I'm going to be drawing quite a few things from an article that she wrote. I want to make sure I give proper approbation. So big news. So 43 million federal student loan borrowers are eligible for this. 43 million. That's a big number. And of that 43 million, approximately 20 million can have all of their debt wiped out. So 20 of the 43 have either under $10,000 of debt, or if they're a Pell Grant recipient, have under $20,000 of debt. So that's part of the facts. Questions. I'm going to do a little quick Q&A here. So how do you get your loans forgiven? Well, it's not automatic. There's going to be a form that people are going to have to fill out with the education department to prove that they qualify under the new income guidelines. But about 8 million borrowers have already provided that income to the Department of Education. I'm assuming that's through having filed their taxes and used the IRS data retrieval system, either with FAFSA and uploaded their taxes that way. But I know that about 8 million people have already confirmed their eligibility. But if people don't go through the proper paperwork, they're not going to get the money. So who qualifies? Well, some advocates have worried that the Department of Education forms are going to provide an additional barrier because low-income borrowers are not going to go through the process of filling out the paperwork, probably just because of lack of knowledge. It's going to be up to people like CBOs and others in schools or parents to inform their student of what proper process they have to go through. Will private loans be forgiven? No. These educational loans held by private lenders are ineligible. One thing we've often talked about is the benefit of federal loans. And one of the reasons are the flexible repayment plans and the potential for loan forgiveness. Well, you're seeing it play out here. This is a big advantage to public loans, federal loans versus private lenders. Are graduate loans eligible for forgiveness? Yes, under the new policy, graduate loans are eligible for up to $10,000, but this is important. They are not eligible for an additional $10,000. So, if you got your 10, for that's offered to the Pell Grant recipient. So the Pell Grant recipients can get 20 graduate student loans, which 1.6 million people have a grad plus loan, including my daughter in college, North Carolina State, which is about $70,000 because she goes through the summers. It's a big nut. Have some grad plus loans. And so that is not additional money in addition to the 10, but it can apply. So are parent loans eligible? So yes, parent plus loans, which, I'm not a big fan of, although I've come around to saying in modest doses, they can make sense in certain instances. They're a federal loan. So yeah, you can get up to the $10,000 in forgiveness if you meet the income thresholds. And 3.6 million people have the Parent Plus loan. It's quite a big number. Are current students eligible? Well, the answer is yes. Current students will qualify for loan forgiveness if their parent income is below the required number to qualify. Now, there's a caveat. That loan must have been originated before July 1st of 2022. So you can't just go rush out, take a new loan now, and then get the $10,000. Does the plan cap what undergraduate borrowers have to pay? Now, this is one thing that's flown under the radar. It's a huge part of this announcement. And a lot of people are missing this. But a new repayment plan is being created, and it's going to cap monthly payments. Now, this is keyword for undergraduate loans to 5% of a person's discretionary income. And friends, we've had several episodes. If you go into our archives, look up interviews and go down to finances, where we've had special guests talk about the difference between the income contingent plan and the income-based plan and repay and payee and all the different types of payment plans that are available under the federal student loans. And so, but in the past, those income-based repayments were capped at 10% of your income. This new plan would cap them at 5%. And so what that's going to mean is going to be a lot easier for people that are trying to make it out there who are struggling to make their actual monthly payment. And another major thing that should not be missed is that balances will be forgiven after 10 years of payments instead of after 20. So if you're working and you're on a modest income track and you go to a 5% repayment plan and you can have loan forgiveness after 10 years, not 20, that's going to be substantial. And a lot of people are missing that, but that's a new part of this announcement. I've already mentioned that you can't take out a loan now and have it forgiven. You have to have taken loans out before July 1st. How will the government determine your income for qualifying for forgiveness? Well, basically, they're going to use either 2020 income or 2021 income. So once again, tax returns. And so that's the main key things about it. A couple other points that worth mentioning. Will you have to pay taxes on the forgiven debt? So fortunately, a 1.9 stimulus package that went into law last year temporarily eliminated having to pay taxes for student loan borrowers if any of their debt was discharged. Now, a little caveat is this tax relief is good through 2026, but of course that's long enough to cover any borrowers. So the bottom line is no, students will not have to pay taxes on this. How much will this cost? Well, originally it was going to be about $230 billion. That's to cancel the $10,000 of student debt. But now with the new provisions in place for Pell Grant recipients, the estimation is between $400 billion and $600 billion is going to be the cost. But, it was costing the federal government a lot to do this pause that had been in effect now, and payments are going to start to kick in. So I'm going to say a few more comments about sort of the arguments pro and for this, but do you have any comments on anything, Lynda, I've said so far? I'm kind of sick of hearing my own voice. That's what I use when I'm tired of hearing my voice talk for a while.
Well, I know that it's certainly going to help a lot of folks, and I like hearing about the income-based repayment, the 5% cap, and having loans discharged after 10 years instead of 20 years. I think will be a big help to a lot of folks.
No, I completely agree. And let me say this, I'm not necessarily confident this is a political winner. There's already a lot of backlash against it. I want to take on some of the arguments against this policy, and I'm going to give you my opinion on it. There'll be a little editorializing here, but that's, we keep it real, and you're listening and you're going to get, our perspective. So here's some of the arguments against debt relief. One is that it doesn't address the problem of college cost. And I would agree it doesn't address the problem of college cost. But this is how I see this argument. If I see a homeless person on the street and I give them a $10 gift card or I get them a burger or something, I didn't fix the problem of homelessness, but it doesn't mean I didn't help that person right there. And so there are other initiatives in place to address the cost of college. So I do not think that that's a legitimate grounds for being against it, because it doesn't fix college costs. You're not going to fix college costs overnight. It's a complex issue. We've talked about it a lot on our podcast. We'll continue to talk about it. In fact, I just recommended a really good book in our recommended resources on college debt that goes into college costs. But so that's my view on that. Just because it doesn't address the problems of college costs doesn't mean it's worth doing. Second argument, it breeds entitlement for future students. I do think that there's potential for that. I do think that people are going to be like, hey, what about mine? I remember when Robert Smith was the commencement speaker at Morehouse, and he stood up and he said, guess what? It is your lucky day because I am bailing you out and I'm covering your college debt. It got a lot of coverage. Well, he did something absolutely magnanimous and beneficent and all of those things for those kids. It didn't mean the next group didn't come up and say, hey, is he going to do it for me? I didn't get the benefit, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a good thing he did for those people. You can always play that what if game. Do I think it will potentially breed some entitlement? Sure. Nobody likes it when you don't get something that maybe you could get on some level, but I still don't think that's a good reason to be against it. Okay, here's a question. It's going to lead to greater inflation. Well, here we do have several people that have chimed in and have spoken and have addressed that issue. And so I'll just share with you the latest research that I've seen on the question of will it be inflationary. So the Committee of Responsible Federal Budget, a DC think tank, who's actually opposed to it, by the way, they say that it will raise inflation by 0.2%, the initial payments. And now that you're doing the Pell Grant thing, it'll be another 0.15%. Then you have the Roosevelt Institute. They have found that a payment moratorium will actually reduce inflation because you'll be freeing up people's money and giving them a lot more flexibility. So that's another view. And then Goldman Sachs is saying it's non-inflationary. So you've got different perspectives on whether it will raise inflation. But the most extreme view is that it will be a modest increase. So if everything from it will help inflation, it'll be a non-factor, so it'll be a modest factor. In my opinion, that is not a good reason to oppose it. So here's something. It isn't fair to most students who don't graduate from college or to most people who don't even go to college. And here's my problem with this argument. There's just so many different things that we have done and we continue to do to help certain people. Just look at the most recent law that passed. Kristen Sinema wouldn't go through with it unless 87 hedge fund billionaires got special tax perks. So what about them? What about PPP, which helped out all kinds of people without income caps? What about how Chrysler got bailed out in the past? Or what about TARP? Or what about the recent $2 trillion tax cut, mostly that went to high income people? Or what about the fact that major corporations weren't paying any taxes at all in many instances? So that wasn't fair to some and not to others. And if people weren't necessarily upset when multimillionaires and billionaires got tax breaks, I feel like that's not a legitimate reason to oppose it. So I just have a problem with that. And I find that argument is selectively used when they don't like the people that they feel are the beneficiaries of something. And they're silent if they do like who the beneficiaries are. And then here's another argument. It isn't legal. And, I'm not an expert here. So I don't know the answer to that. It's presidential overreach. It needed congressional approval. Congress controls the budget. I know one of the issues, because I've been following this closely, is in order to bring a challenge against it, you're going to have what they call standing. And standing means you have to show you've been wrongfully harmed. And so who's going to be able to bring standing to bring an argument and say that? I'm not sure. But those are some of the arguments against it. But there's one thing I do want to say, and that is that there's a massive racial wealth gap in this country, massive. And I think for some people, use the example of you go outside and it's just a little drizzle, it's a little minor inconvenience, a drizzle. Do I pull up my umbrella? Maybe, maybe not. Well, in some communities, it's a massive tornado. And that's how student debt has been in under-resourced communities, in brown and black communities. I just saw that half of all Latinos will have their debt completely erased through this. And I think addressing the racial wealth gap is important because in the case, black people came over 1619 over 400 years ago, and you've just started in the last few decades to put some policy in place to try to address disparity. And so that wealth gap creates a lot of problems in society, whether it's crime or other things can be correlated to that. And so I think when you do something to help, these are not people who are dealing drugs. These are people who went off to college to better themselves, to become nurses or teachers or educators or whatever. And my view is they shouldn't have had to borrow this much money. It's because we failed as a system by not supporting our institutions that people were in this situation. So I think these arguments are shallow, and I think it's a good thing. So any final comments?
I agree with everything that you said. I think it's at the end of the day, it's a good thing. And there are other ways to go after the cost of college. It's not a binary decision. So I think it's a good thing.
Awesome.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
And friends, we're in part 2 of my interview with Tom Becker, who's Associate Director of Admissions at the University of Pittsburgh. And I'm joined once again by Susan Tree. So the two of us interviewed Tom. Get into a lot of topics in part 2 of this interview. And friends, if you haven't heard part one, I'd strongly encourage you to go back and hear it. I really think that Tom is just doing a really good job elucidating and helping us understand Pitt. But here he gets into things such as, does Pitt admit students into specific colleges, or does Pitt admit into the entire university? How does Pitt provide advising to help students find the right major? What are the strongest majors at Pitt? What's a major change they're making to one of their top majors? What does it mean that Pitt uses rolling admissions and holistic admissions at the same time? What does Pitt need to improve? How difficult is it to get into the various programs at Pitt? And what are the hardest programs to get into? What does your application need to be submitted for Pitt's most competitive programs? When are the first decisions released? When are students admitted to the regional campuses versus the main Pittsburgh campus? And what are the strongest programs at the regional campuses? What role do mid-year grades play in the admission process? And what role does standardized testing play? So it's a lot. I hope you enjoy it. Tom Becker, listen and enjoy.
Who helps kids figure this out? I mean, it sounds like the most amazing smorgasbord of options and possibilities. But when families talk to us, that the kids are like, I wouldn't, who helps me kind of like develop a roadmap, especially if they're not coming in, they were all going to say that they're business or STEM.
Yeah.
That, it's not fashionable to come in saying, well, it's either going to be, English and history or maybe, whatever. But how is the journey planned and navigated?
Yeah. And I would say I'm going to talk about, because Pitt admits students into direct schools, right? So you're admitted to the Dietrich School of Arts and Sciences, or the Swanson School of Engineering, School of Business, School of Computing and Information, School of Nursing, now the School of Public Health. And so each of those will do it a little bit different. But I think one of the common themes for that relates to students have to try, right? One of our challenges is that many students coming from high school, they've just taken the next challenging class. English, right. They took the next challenging class, right? Math, they took the next. There was not a thinking related to where my interest areas truly lie. So I can remember both of my children going through our online orientation the first time and wanting me to decide, wanting the advisor to tell them, this is the class I should take, right? And them struggling through those, your first year writing intensive class. My daughter finally settled on Russian fairy tales. My son finally settled on ancient philosophy, which was taught in the Turkish nationality room, which is a side issue. But the advising system at Pitt is excellent. The Dietrich School talks about this personalized education, but students will go through this growth period, this discovery period that they have to try. And then they get to that academic advisor and they've gone through all of these questionnaires and the advisor starts pushing back on them a little bit. So what about this? What about that? And there is no right or wrong answer. The College of Business, every year through many of their, you got all these rankings out there, always talks about the intentional advising that they provide their students. All of their students go through strength finders, and those advisors then link those to classes and student organizations and community-based organizations, right? For them to be active in that education. It's not going to come to them via osmosis. Right. They have to want to be active in the community. And again, we allow for that. But there's some unsettledness with that. And the student that is attracted to Pitt kind of embraces that. They're ready for that. They sort of want this sense of discovery. How do I in that, Susan, it's also why so many of our students are doing a major and then a minor, right? A major and a certificate. It'll allow you this model of discovery allows them to really, for the first time in a career, start to hone down into some of these intricacies that my Emma thought she was physical therapy, and she got into an orientation class, and she got a guaranteed graduate admissions as a high school student. So she was guaranteed a spot in the number one physical therapy program in the nation, right? And she got into this specialized seminar her first year where they talked about all of the health professions, and all of a sudden discovered, oh, I want to go into speech pathology.
Oh,
that's where my gift is. That's where my interest is. Now, I will tell you, a little bit of me died, right?
Yeah,
because
right.
having a guarantee admissions to physical therapy at Pitt is like
golden.
Yeah, it's the golden ticket. But she has excelled because that's where she found herself and her passion, right? And so student, was there struggles through that? Yes. But the support was there, both within the classroom, with her advisors, with her faculty, with her peer group that she met, right? And so, but students have to be active. They have to raise their hand and say, I don't quite know, or I'm frustrated here. And there's resources.
Tom, I want to follow up. I don't want to work off the assumption that everybody knows how much both the city of Pittsburgh and the university are really a healthcare power. So obviously you've commented on physical therapy, but go a little bit more in depth on two things. One, how strong the university is when it comes to healthcare related majors, how that relates to the city. And then secondly, something you and I talked about in our pre-meeting in preparation for this, which is how underrated the computer science department is. So if you could comment on those two things, that'd be great.
Yeah, we are one of the sort of commitments by Pitt and the city and many of the foundations within the city when we were a dying city because of steel leaving the nation. Healthcare, they jumped on healthcare. And you see the interconnectedness with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center and the university. And there is a direct correlation between their success and our success. You will see those 6 teaching hospitals within walking distance, 5 of them owned by the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, the other one's the Veterans Administration. And students literally every day have opportunities to work, to volunteer, to do undergraduate research. I think we're currently ranked 4th in the nation for research funding from the National Institutes of Health.
Wow.
So if you're in the life sciences and health and medicine would be in that area, that's where you want your funding sources to come from, because they're long-standing commitment to those researchers, and our undergraduates are involved in that. And so I can talk about how my daughter was in communication sciences and disorders. For 2 years, worked in biomedical research with swallowing. And if you swallow, you have to take a lot of radiation, right, to see what's going on. And they're working on ways to not have to have that radiation, right? And she was absolutely involved in all of that research. As someone that's not right, it's related but not related, and but she really, really digged it. And the relations to computer science, that's the other thing, tech, right? You have a powerhouse next to us in another university, but we do it pretty darn well. Actually,
Tom's referring to Carnegie Mellon, in case anyone's not following that.
Yeah. And we have we've had computer science for over 50 years. One of the first in the nation to offer a computer science degree was always in the Dietrich School of Arts and Sciences. And we've pulled that out to create an entire new school of computing and information. And if you look at what they're doing, yes, they're going to teach students to be great coders. But as freshmen, they're out working with the nonprofits, and you got to communicate to people. Right? You got this idea of computer science is the new humanities. They're involved in like everything, And that's the philosophy that they take. And so students, there are majors like computing for the social sciences, digital computing and digital narrative, looking at the English and video games and the storylines and combining those sorts of things. They're trying to break down, again, yes, you're going to be a great programmer, but let's break down some of these walls. Again, going back to the mission statement, for the betterment of society. And how do we provide big data to areas in the health professions, but also social sciences, English, other areas. And I don't know if I'm explaining this as well as I should be, but we limit the number of freshmen into the School of Computing and Information to 200 freshmen a year. That's on purpose. They want very specific outcomes. They want students to be exposed and involved in that undergraduate research. And there's lots of big plans associated with computing continuing to move forward. And so did that help? Did I answer that,
Sure.
Mark?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I think when we spoke earlier, you differentiated a little ways how maybe Carnegie Mellon takes a slightly different philosophy. And maybe that's what you were emphasizing here. Was that what it was?
Well, I don't know Carnegie Mellon's sort of philosophy, but I do know Pitt's philosophy that it is in the area of bringing more in that cross-disciplinary and looking at underrepresented groups in computing, and really especially women, and encouraging that and providing the mentoring and resources for them to be successful, and the sense of belonging and representation within faculty and staff. And
right.
Yeah. So
I've got one more follow up, and then I'll let Susan ask a few. So, you mentioned how you limit the school to 200 freshmen.
Yeah.
So I imagine that could be pretty competitive. So what does that look like in terms of the profile of the type of student that's admitted in, and when are they admitted? And talk to us a little bit about that, because computer science is a super hot major right now.
Yeah.
And so what's the profile of that freshman that's getting in?
Yeah. And can I broaden that out?
Sure.
Sort of in general to just talk about our admissions process and
sure.
what
Why don't you do that? And then I'm sure Susan will have some follow-ups for you after.
And then I'll come down,
sure,
and get to computer science and our other areas. So Pitt is on rolling admissions, which means that when a student applies to the university, when their file is complete, we will render an admissions decision. It is holistic, so a minimum of 2 admissions counselors, if not 3, are going to read that file before a decision is made. Each school will tell us sort of what they're looking for in terms of their students and their profiles. Arts and sciences, because of our, let's say, 4,465 freshmen, 3,000 spots are reserved for arts and sciences. And we talked about how the double majors and all of that. And so having and looking for students that have sort of this intellectual curiosity, that are taking appropriate classes. They're not, maybe it's not all APs, right? You have, I serve on a lot of panels with rising seniors, juniors, and their parents, and the AP classes always come up. And your student. Your student. Are you going to pour water on their fire by having them take all APs, and then that desire and that level of learning is gone? And so we'll look at some of that. We'll look at those trends. We'll look at are they still discovering, right? You'll find some students that freshman year, it was hard. It was really hard. And then all of a sudden there's this upward projection, or maybe you will have, especially with COVID, you saw some real dips, right? And maybe we asked for mid-year grades. And so we waited on that decision. But arts and science is different than, let's use business, right? Where they have 350 freshmen and they say, I need you to look at the math sequence. You need to be specific related to at least pre-calc. And if they can get to calculus, great. But AP statistics is also really good. What's their trends in their essay? Are they talking about are they workers, right? Do they have this entrepreneurial sort of attitude? Computer science, yeah, it's that math sequence. That math sequence is important. Are they, we're with board examinations, right? Over half of our class now is coming in as test optional. And in computer science, and this may scare some parents, have they failed?
Mm-hmm.
Have they experienced some challenge in their life that they've had to overcome? And that, when I say that, people think it's this massive thing that has occurred in their life. And it could be very small. It could be not being selected for a sports team or a play or a marching band for first chair, right? Because we're designed, especially in computer science, you're going to hit some walls that you're going to need to overcome. And are you going to fade? Or are you going to work through that and get through that? And so I'm looking for that. Now, the strength of our review is that I'm looking for something a little different than maybe a first year admissions counselor is looking for in their life experiences. And so that can be hard to tackle when students and counselors don't want to see their students not get admitted or waitlisted or seventh semester transcript. But it is part of this college search process that they need to go through.
Absolutely. Do you read by academic division?
We do.
So the team that's reading applications, say for whatever the undergraduate colleges, the standard, the competitive standard varies somewhat. Then I assume probably you have a little bit more leeway in your arts and your liberal arts division because the numbers are so much bigger.
Correct. That absolutely. And so an example, and I want to talk about our most extreme, right? It's actually the School of Nursing.
Sure.
And because of those teaching hospitals and their many of the students will live in Lothrop Hall, and that residence hall is physically connected to Presbyterian Hospital. And
wow.
there's a skywalk that walks them from Presby over to the Victoria building, right? I mean, and they can do their clinical rotations and actually be college students and join fraternities and sororities and go to the football games and have a life, yet have a they have almost double the clinical rotations. And so students in nursing, in our rolling admissions, right, we will fill our class up early, right?
Right.
But the other in nursing, and every year the class changes as to when we start tightening up our admissions criteria, because it will get the longer a student waits, the harder some of those admissions criteria become. And so but one of the benefits of rolling admissions is that there's no commitment. There is zero pressure to say yes to us until May 1 of your senior year. So if students are interested in Pitt, the sooner they apply, the more spots I have open, the better chance that they'll get admitted. And then they've just put that duck in a row, right? That, okay, I've got this. And now I can enjoy my senior year and wait for the other schools.
Tom, let's concretize that a little, because I think that's helpful, but still maybe vague. So when does the application open up, and when would be the time, knowing what you know about Pitt, that you would say, get your application in by X, just to not face a stiffer competition? How would you answer that?
Yeah. And so our application will open August 1. I would say in normal times, I'd say 3 years ago, I would say December 1, you're fine. You're fine. This past year, we had 53,000 applications, 19,000 additional applications from our history, the history of the university. And so some of those deadlines pushed. November 1 may have been late for nursing, right? And that's I know I'm providing, and as I say this, anxiety is being ramped up by the listeners, and I don't want to do that, but I also want to be realistic, and I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. The arts and sciences, you're probably pretty good, right? But business this last year, brutal, really, really challenging. Engineering stayed okay for a while. Nursing, hard. And Mark, I know you want me to say dates, right? I know you want me to.
Well, I know it's tough because obviously you've already said it can change from year to year, right? But if it opens in August, would it be safe to say if people are getting things in by October 1?
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, especially for the professional programs.
Yeah.
Because I would say that instead of inducing stress, I actually think it helps people just to have,
I agree.
For them to know, okay, Pitt's one it opens in August 1. Let me get it into the first 60 days.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When do the first decisions, Tom, start being released in your experience?
Yeah. Probably, it'll be, there will be a core set of operations staff that will really be doing some decisions. And I would say by early to mid-September, some of those will start to go out, but they could go out earlier, right? And then by October 1, we're in and we're going hard.
Right.
And then by November 1, we're in reading season. And
right.
That is what we are doing. Yeah.
Well, and something that our listeners may not know is that Pitt includes a large number of regional campuses.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it can throw an applicant for a loop when they are admitted, but not to the main campus.
Yes.
And is that done right from the get-go, where the readers have a yardstick in their mind about what a main campus admitted student is going to look like in a particular program? And will they hold on to an application, or will they immediately make an offer of admission to a
regional campus? Yeah. I think early, we don't know the number of applications we're going to get. We don't know what the profile is going to look like. So we tend to be hold on to those applications a little bit more. We talk about mid-year grades. That is a common, if we have a student that's sort of on a line or we want to wait, it's not uncommon for us to ask for the grades after the first semester of the senior year. And students should not read into that. They need to know that we're serious. They still very much have an opportunity to come to the Pittsburgh campus. But the regional campuses, especially Greensburg, which is 30, 40 minutes away, is a really good option for those liberal arts schools. Johnstown, about an hour and a half from Pittsburgh. The engineering is very strong. And then Bradford, and that's on a ski chalet. It's built on an old ski slope, which is really an interesting environment. And then Bradford is north. It's right on the border of New York, in sort of the Allegheny Forest, and really strong in the CSI and criminal investigation and those sorts of things. And so for students that are specifically, and we're talking specifically about the Pittsburgh campus, it is to your advantage to apply early because we have all of our spots open, but also don't get getting a mid-year grade chase. Asking for your first semester grades is common. And if you get that, really important that when those grades become available, to get them to us as soon as they can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, something that confuses a lot of families, having been in a school for many years, is some students would get an admissions decision. And this is true of a lot of places that are unrolling, not just Pitt, but colleges that don't have necessarily identified waves of review, but
Correct.
really when your application is complete, it will be evaluated. Maybe we'll let you know right away. Maybe we'll hold on for some either additional information or to view how the competition plays out. Is one student might be admitted lickety split and another. And I always said to families, different majors, different timetables. Did you look at the website to see if they promised a reply date? No, they didn't. So no, I'm not going to call and say, Tom, what's going on?
Yeah.
Sometimes I would anyway, just because I wanted to touch base. And, because, for example, last year, if the numbers inflated so strong, so fast, it was helpful for all of the people in the trenches to understand which programs might especially be, and more power to the people who got those applications in early, because I'm sure the pressure mounted as the reading season went on and you saw those applications flooding in.
Yeah, if we would have known, if we could have looked at the crystal ball, we could have set expectations. We talk about 6 to 8 weeks we can have an admissions decision back, but with that number, it
oh my goodness,
really extended out, and we had to have we were sending communications to students, to school counselors, videos on our website, just really asking for some grace and some patience. We're really working through it. But it was hard and frustrating for many.
What does your research show why you exploded last year?
My question exactly, Mark.
I wish we knew. Quite frankly, I think some of it is related to during the pandemic. We really did take care of our students well. In our faculty and staff.
Wow.
There were, everyone had challenges, but we were very fortunate to have literally world-renowned experts on campus in epidemiology and public health that really helped us. And our students bought in, and they were wearing masks, but by and large, right? There's outliers, right? But we did that well, and I think that got through to students and families. And then when I started at Pitt, we were reducing the emphasis on board exams. But the pandemic really put jet fuel on that. And if I were to, I'm speculating here.
Sure.
Right? We're still evaluating that. We're still trying to figure that out. But I would say that, we had a year where students got the year prior, they got in, and they were able that if we were looking at their board exams in the past history, they wouldn't have. And these non-cognitive factors are playing a difference. And I think students and school counselors saw that students got in. And this year, same way, over half of our class is going to come in with that as test optional. And we're doing a better job of reviewing, looking at different things. As an admissions counselor, the board exam can be a crutch. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but it makes things easier, but we know that they're flawed. Yet if a student believes that is a representation of their ability, send it in. If they don't, it's one factor. And I don't know if people believe that until 2 years ago when
Right.
it became a reality.
Well,
and this year it's a reality.
You know what? I just want to say bravo, but I also am deeply saddened that it took universities this long to get there, because we heard a lot of exactly the opposite of what you just said, Tom. Is colleges didn't believe, universities especially, didn't believe that they could make good admissions decisions in the absence of scores. And now I bring my own bias to this, having worked at Bates College in the 80s, which led the test optional movement in terms of research, and now has launched 40 years of longitudinal data. But I really believe that colleges just didn't have the courage or the vision to understand how they could do it. And I know that a lot of research universities like Temple and Wake Forest and others did fabulous pilot studies, and other big guns around the country. So I'm sorry it took a pandemic, but I would be, and look at Maryland's announcement, yesterday, Mark? The day before, that they're never going back. And I hope that the Georgias and the Floridas of the world can do the research now that they have a class that came in test optional, that is more diverse, more motivated, more everything in terms of long-term success. So I'll get off my high horse here and just say how pleased I am to hear you say that. And I really, as an educator, applaud what you just shared. I think it's truth to power.
Well, and Susan, I love what you said. It's about the data.
Yep.
It's about our students being successful. And what are those success metrics, right? And we're in the process of still evaluating that, right? The board of trustees, the provosts, the schools, they will make those decisions.
That's right.
We don't make, in the Office of Admissions, we don't make those decisions. We guide them, we advise them, and so we're still evaluating it. We have to make sure that what we're doing is at the success of our students, right?
And how you measure success. It really challenges an institution to define what does success mean.
Yes.
What does it mean? And this is a short aside, but I think our listeners are always interested in this kind of stuff. And granted, Bates College was a liberal arts college, where there were only undergraduates and there was tremendous faculty-student interaction. But as the early classes of test optional kids moved forward, and the students who were not submitting scores at that time had a hugely statistically significant lower test score. So it wasn't like, they were really close anyway. It was enormous. It was enormous how much lower their scores are. So I'm sure a lot of schools like Pitt would find out too in the recent, that the persisting GPAs and achievement of those students was never lower than the kids who had submitted their stellar SAT scores. But do you know the one area where the lower scores came back and repeated and showed an effect? I'll let you make a guess.
No idea. I don't want to guess.
Graduate record exams.
Jerry,
and MCATs, LSATs, go figure, playing on the same dimension of brain architecture that discriminated against those students to begin with. So just an interesting aside, but bravo. And we look forward to hearing the research. I'm sure none of your faculty, though, are complaining against the quality and diversity of the students that they're teaching. That's been a wonderful thing.
Yes, agreed.
Friends, this concludes the second part of what is a 3-part interview. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part. Friends, on Thursday's episode, once again, you get Susan Tree. This time we're talking about an article called Why Campus Tours Keep College Presidents Up at Night. Our question from listener, once again, comes from Cadence, a student at Stuyvesant High School. And she wants to know, if I'm asked in an interview, what other colleges are you applying to? How am I supposed to answer that question? And we start a brand new interview, and I'm joined by Julia this time. It's Heath Einstein, who's over the admission office at Texas Christian University, better known as TCU. We hope every one of you will join us on Thursday for this episode. And friends, just remember, college is not a prize to be won. It is a match to be made. Now, that doesn't mean anything is wrong with factoring selectivity into your decision. I'm not somebody who believes selectivity doesn't matter. I believe the caliber of the students that you're around matters a lot, actually. And getting that right level of challenge matters a lot. So having selectivity be one component, even an important component of your search, that makes a lot of sense. But defining a school by the low acceptance rate and judging this school's better than that school because the acceptance rate is lower, it misses out on a multiplicity of factors that should be involved in attempting to make a match for college. So just remember, college is a match to be made. It is not a prize to be won. See you on Thursday. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Thursday.